Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Whereabouts are you in the world today?
Oh, I'm calling you from Singapore. Bright, sunny, and really hot here.
Yeah, I bet it's always hot there. Yeah, it's always great. And you and I have always caught up in Singapore when I've been there several times, or a lot of times per year.
Yeah, exactly.
And
exactly.
yeah, we've always caught up. So I've told our listeners a little bit about your background, just in a quick introduction there. Tell me more about your background. Is there anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah, sure. I spend most of my time in the technology world. And I think it's always exciting. We are always in the forefront of changes and all the new and exciting technology that have lots of promises. Some deliver really well, some pretty far stretch. But I must say that I really enjoy riding ahead of the curve. And hence, that's why after almost 30 years with HP and various other technology companies, I really want to get in the position to continue to enjoy the wave of technology. So now I'm with the company called Lantern.ai, who's providing go-to-market as a service for software as a service business and AI startups. So I think this is really exciting, really continue to propel into the world of as a service, everything as a service. And I think that's probably the beginning of this wave, and we will see more to come. And on the other hand, I'm sitting on a few boards, right? On one hand, I'm serving with Singapore Red Cross as their board council member. I'm also the chairman of the international responses. And over the last 2 years, we were just being so busy with all these COVID responses and all. But I would also say having this strategic view on the board really changed my perspective on many different things, right? We need to look longer term, but at the same time, we also need to be very surgical in our responses to situations that require us to make a difference. So I'm enjoying myself a lot, right? Especially connecting with the network that I built up over time, right?
Yeah.
People like yourself, in a matter of course, I can get some great advice or some great connects or tips to get things even better, faster, and more responsive. I think that's one thing we shouldn't underestimate, the network that we build up over time. Am I really excited? Yep.
That's awesome. I'm going to come back to you in relation to the networking, but there was something else you said before, which is around your background. So here you are at it was a Fortune 10 company, and then of course it split up being Hewlett Packard. Then you've gone and left there. Now you've gone into a startup, but then you've also gone from an internal senior role within a large corporate, now also as a board member of a couple boards as well. Tell me the transition between the corporate into the startup and then into the boards. What's that transition been like for you?
It is an interesting one. Yeah, I think you need to be conscious that you need change. You need to have a change in your mindset, your attitude about how things happen, and you need to change the world, but you need to change yourself first, right? You need to be adaptive. You need to be adjusting yourself to the different requirement, and every situation requires you to be different. So for me, I need to switch consciously to that mindset and no longer in a large company. I need to be as nimble, as flexible, and as adaptive to the environment that I needed to.
Yeah. So good. So we need to be adaptive. We change and nimble, and also our mindset. That's a huge one, right? Around the mindset. And Denis, you said earlier on before that, even you actually said about how you enjoyed the ride ahead of the curve. When you say, and I think that's the words you used, when you say that, what do you do to stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I would normally try to look at the big picture, where the entire trend is heading, where the situation is heading, then allow me to project myself forward so that I can be in a place where I can receive the ball, right? You can read the ball, where it's going, and you need to move to where the puck is heading instead of responding to yesterday's situation. So that's what I normally would aim to do. Sometimes I might miss it, but sometimes I will run ahead of the ball. But it's this practice and trying to anticipate, and you will get it right as you perfectly art. It's a combination of art and science by reading a situation.
That's a nice way of putting it, a combination of art and science. But you're right, it's actually reading the situation before it even happens and having that sort of hindsight, well, not hindsight, having that vision and that insight to be able to actually see it happening as well, and which is fantastic. Now, the other thing you mentioned, as I said, I'll come back to it, was networking. And as you said, I think that's probably one of the big things that has helped you be successful and other leaders as well. But a lot of leaders out there today aren't very good at networking. What would be one or two tips you might actually say to people that they should do in building a network? What are one or two things they can do?
To be honest, I'm not an extrovert. So for me, networking doesn't come naturally. But I do consciously find common interests and common topics that I could strike a win relationship, right? And I believe in building a relationship for long term. So I'm not going to go in with the short-term gain for myself over the other party, but I would want to go in, understand what's their hot button, what would they need me to value add to them in this relationship. Because once I establish that, then typically I could work ourselves from business associate to partners, and then sometimes into friends. If the common interests go beyond just the business win solutions, right? And into personal interests, I think that's where it will be that level that you can have a really sustainable network out there.
Yeah, fantastic. And I really like what you say there about building relationships. I think people tend to get hung up about that word networking. And it's not about networking. It's about building relationships for the future as well, as you said. And I think that's very good that we can do that. Looking for people's hot buttons and helping them. And yes, I think that's great. And when you said you're probably you're not an extrovert, you're an introvert. Come on, man. I've seen you. We've had some fun together and good laughs and things like that. And I know that your hair at times have been spiky as well. What do you mean you're not an extrovert?
Yeah, those are my antennas to pick up the right signal. There's a bit about natural self, right? So if I'm in my downtime, I might be just reading a few books, magazines, watching some movies, or pick up some nice photography to learn more. I'm probably more in the mode of learning, but I want to learn in a quiet space. And that's my natural self. But when I'm then out on almost like a mission, be it a business setting or in a personal setting where I need to connect, when I need to build up relationship for a long-term good. It could be a charitable mission. It could be a business mission. But then I switch on to that mode about wanting to build sustainable relationship and meaningful relationship. And I constantly ask myself, how could I value add to this party, to this person that I'm meeting, right? So that maybe it's quite a strain to myself. That's why sometimes it becomes not that enjoyable. But sometimes when it's so much fun that you forget that you are in a mission to.
Yeah. And I think if you have fun and you have a little bit of humor, it actually does help things along a bit, because at times it can be a little bit difficult for sure.
I guess I say I focus on leadership and I'm industry agnostic. So I spent the first 2 years of my career in manufacturing, then the next couple of years in turnaround consulting. And then I actually started with our parent company, which is a staffing company. And then from there have grown our digital marketing agency. So I think the unique part about me is just finding the leadership trends that weave throughout totally different kinds of businesses. And even though I'm a younger guy, I've got to see a lot of things, and you start to put patterns together of what things stand true and through industry, geographic location, whatever it is.
Awesome. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about those patterns you may be seeing throughout businesses and so forth going forward. And I noticed that you're doing a little bit of research on you, that you're always excited to talk about how your passion for sports informs the approach to, say, team building and things like that. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, they say, what you learn in school, you probably forget 90% of as you enter the real work world. But growing up, I actually had the chance to play on some really high performing teams. So you probably don't have much of it down where you are, Dennis, but ice hockey is a big sport in Minnesota. So that's what I grew up. Minnesota in the United States we're called the state of hockey. We don't quite compete with Canada probably in terms of the country of hockey, but yeah, that's really, I would say a lot of the things I've learned even through my career, I still relate back to the high performing teams I was on growing up and watching teams that now have half the team has played in the NHL might not have won a championship at a youth level because there was too many egos or not the right coach or whatever. And then you have these average teams where all of us are in the business world now that did great things that no one thought we could accomplish. And again, looking at the patterns, I look back to why those teams melded together in a way that they did to achieve success. And so that's, as I go through my leadership meetings and whatnot, even today, I always find myself going back to sporting analogies that I've found to be true.
Yeah, interesting. You talk about ice hockey. Because I traveled a lot with my global roll around with Hewlett-Packard and went to the US a lot every year. And in particular to the Bay Area in San Francisco, but also into Dallas, where EDS used to have their headquarters and then they were bought out by Hewlett-Packard. And I got the chance to go by a very good friend of mine to take me to an ice hockey game. And it was the Dallas All-Stars, I think it's called.
Dallas Stars, yeah. Dallas Stars.
Yep. And then the other one was the Canadian, and I'm going to get it wrong, Maple Leaf, is that?
Yep. Toronto Maple Leafs.
Toronto Maple Leaf. Okay, cool. So I got to see that game live, but they also happened to have the Stanley Cup there. And so I got a photo of the Stanley Cup. And then there was a guy there who's the commentator on TV all the time for the ice hockey games. And I actually found out later, because I had a photo with him, got to meet with him, I actually was his guest. I went on his ticket. And so it was pretty cool. And so, yeah, I just loved the whole atmosphere, not just the game, but the whole atmosphere and what it was like. And yeah, first time I've ever been to it. And yeah, I really liked it. So I think it's quite cool. And I get what you're saying about that team building side of things and how it all works together. So it's pretty good.
It's probably mostly European, Russian, like US, Canada is predominant, but I think there's a lot of things to learn, like tennis. It's a single person sport, the mental, like on, off, like I've read a ton of books of psychologists who have coached tennis players and like the skills needed to be an independent contributor versus hockey is a game of flow and execution and positioning. And not only do you have the 5 guys on the ice, but you have another 15 guys on the bench and the strategy behind that. And so just all the different sports, even though growing up in hockey, every different sport has like its own lessons and team sports versus individual sports. And I've just tried to, like I said, intertwine that as much as possible into my business life as well.
Yeah, very good. So you have sounds like a few businesses or a couple of companies there in particular, and you may have more. How did you get into leadership?
Accident? No. Yeah, I think just having opportunities at a young age, like when I came out of college, my now wife, her father owned a company and their CFO had left 3 or 4 months before. And so my first job out of college was like the controller of a $20 million company. And I had no idea what I was doing. My credits and debits were like backwards, even though I had a degree in finance. And like you slowly got to learn. And then my next role, just a couple of things happened where I ended up being on a team with the CEO and the CFO, helping them prepare for a sale to a publicly traded company and then the integration with the publicly traded company. And at that time, I was probably 24 years old and I had a team of 5 underneath me that led that charge. And then it just kept going from there where I was actually able to buy with private equity, another manufacturing company, which I was the CEO of, and we scaled that and sold it. And but at the end, I think we had 30 employees and then got into turnaround consulting, which was back to that kind of individual contributor, but helping align the organization and then now building Parka. So it was just like one of those things where early in my career, I've always been driven, motivated and wanting to build things. And I think especially at a young age for people that haven't been in leadership roles before, like it's crazy how people observe and watch you. I remember when in the second company, when we got purchased by the global publicly traded company, the guy, actually, I still remember him because he made such an impression, but his name was Roman and he was from Canada and he would fly in to work through the integration and stuff. And he always made a point to stop by and be like, man, like for your age, like you have a bright future, and I can see it. And the leaders of the company in Minnesota have such great things to say about you. And just though, like we were going through so many changes, there was nights where I like slept over at the office, or we would migrate a system and I would stay all night to make sure that when the employees got there in the morning, that they had a functioning ERP system. And so it's just that even when I took that role at that company, a lot of the other accountants were like, oh, you don't want to take that role. Everyone's failed that's one in that role. No one makes it. And I'm like, who cares? If I do it and I fail, then I guess I apply for the next job. But yeah, it's just taking that risk. I've always had the entrepreneurial mindset of do first, ask for forgiveness later, which sometimes is great, sometimes gets you into trouble. But I think that's just the will and the desire to lead people. Like even today, like I'm 34 now. Parka is the first job, mostly because digital marketing is a new generation of people. But this is the first time in my entire career that I've had people under me that are younger than me. Like my whole life, everyone I've managed has been older than me. And for some people, I've had people ask in the past, is that weird for you? And I'm like, I've done it since I was 23. I don't know. It's just become normal. Leaders lead. I don't know that you put an age stamp on it.
Yeah. I was really quite intrigued when you were saying that. I was thinking to myself, I wonder what that was like for him and did he have people older than him working for him, of course? And you've just answered that, which is really interesting. And the thing here is, were you always like this? In other words, that kind of work ethic mindset of just getting things done, giving it a go? Because as you said, there's some people go, oh, wouldn't do that role. You failed. Everyone's failed. And it's just, it doesn't mean I will fail. And it doesn't mean, but also I think that's where we learn. So for you, have you always had that kind of mindset right from a young age? And how did you get that kind of mindset, if you did?
Yeah, I guess we go back to the first question of sports, right? As the discipline and work ethic you learn to be an elite athlete doesn't come easy. I spent a lot of time, with a lot of credit to my dad, is like when I was 4, 5, 6 years old, we lived in a town of 10,000 people down in the southwest cornfields of Minnesota. And they had a ice hockey bubble. And because it was refrigerated, it was actually colder in there than it was outside. And some days I would skate by myself with no one else out there for an hour, 2 hours, freezing, just trying to be the best that I could be. And that led to, I think I was probably 9 or 10. My dad saw a newspaper clipping to make Team Minnesota. And at the time, I was competing with kids from all the fancy, rich places in Minnesota and the Twin Cities. And I was this little farm kid that no one even knew where the town was. And I ended up making the team, of which, you know, probably half of that team today, like, played in the NHL at some point. And it was just one of those things where it was like, if you don't try, how do you know if you're going to make it? And when you do try and you do make it, how cool are the opportunities? Like, I was 8, 9 years old and we were playing in tournaments in Vancouver, British Columbia, and Detroit, Michigan. And it was like the Mighty Ducks. If you've ever seen the Mighty Ducks, I know it's probably an American movie. We're that squad that got to experience crazy things at a young age. And obviously that just kept compounding throughout my sports career. And so I guess it's really just instilled in me based on how I was raised and the work ethic behind it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.